Chair recognizes the senator from Palo Alto, Senator Kibbie.
What do you say after that, huh? First of all, I'd like to introduce my family members that are here, and that includes, you all know my wife Kay has been here since 1991, and my family and members of her family took the day off today, and they've been sitting up here in the balcony. I don't know how tired that must get, but I certainly appreciate them being here today, and this large family of mine. You know, we talk about, a lot of people ask over the years, how does that Democrat farmer get elected in northern Iowa? Well, one reason is these gals in my family, they've been knocking on doors since they could reach a doorknob. And please vote for my dad, you know. And the boys, they were a little, they hung back a little more and always had the excuse, you know, we got too much to do out at the farm. You know, when I first came here in 1961, after John F. Kennedy election, and it was very negative for Democratic candidates in Iowa that year. We ended up with 29 members of the House of Representatives, Democrats, out of 108. And, you know, and then 2 years later, Harold Hughes got elected governor, a Democrat. And there were some changes in the House, but there were still 29 Democrats out of 108. And then, of course, in '64, I chose to run for the Senate, and not knowing, you know, at that time what was going to be the results of that election. But in 1964, the largest Democratic landslide in history. And the first time the Democrats had control, the governor and both houses of the legislature for 30 years. And so we had a lot of new ideas, and we passed a lot of bills that are still on the books today. And I came to the Senate, a farmer without any post-high school education, and Lieutenant Governor Fulton was in the chair and encouraged me to chair the Education Committee. Because when I was in the House, in the minority, I raised this issue of junior colleges and not being funded. And at that time, there was federal legislation passed that there was some federal aid out there for people. It was primarily for veterans. And so anyway, all I want to talk about in that community college bill, that we met for 6 solid weeks in room 24, 4 days a week at 7:30 in the morning. And we finally come with the bill that most of what the bill was when it come out of committee, the merged area school bill. But my main point is, I don't recall, and we could go back in the journal and look, I don't recall one partisan vote. And we had a lot of votes. You know, organized labor was concerned about their apprenticeship programs being run over. Of course, the private colleges were concerned, the regents were concerned, and the new program statewide for post-high school education. Remember, in 1965, the state never had a $1 billion state budget. And that didn't happen until 2 years later in '67. But the senators that I worked with are on the Republican side that I met with later and after they left the legislature, and like Senator Jepson, Luke DeCoster, Vern Lyle, Dave Stanley, that's not an unknown name, Senator Bob Rigler, and many other, Senator Briles. And I met his daughter, and I've met family of those people that served here, and that was working in that committee and on the floor to get that bill passed. That was one of their greater experiences in the legislature and as a minority party. And so today we have far too many partisan votes where we wouldn't have to have. And I kind of regret that we've gone too far on partisanship. But that's one of the areas. I think that's why it's been so successful, that we passed a very broad bill. You couldn't pass a bill like that today, I don't believe, with hardly any restrictions for a local board to make these commitments on the types of programs to offer in all different kinds of regions of the state was actually pretty remarkable. And really, we sat here in this Senate in them days, and it's really not much different now than it was then. The chairs around the outside here in them days where you could come in and the lobby and visitors and sit there. And the third day of debate on Senate File 550, the voc tech directors, and they were primarily from K-12 schools, and the deans of the 16 junior colleges, one of the group sat over here and the other group over there. They really didn't want to be put together. They wanted to have two separate systems, but we married them together. That's my terms. And that was the best thing that we've ever done. Nationally, that's one of the reasons that the Iowa system has come to the top. Because there's still states trying to separate them two systems and trying to get them together, because today you need technology no matter what kind of a program. You need arts and science, what kind of program. Even states around us. You can look at Minnesota system, Illinois system. But anyway, and I got a lot of credit for that. But nobody does anything in this building by themselves. You know, I hear people talking about, I did this and I did that. That's baloney. You know, I've even heard lobbyists say that. That's really baloney. But, you know, so enough for that. But in the campaign, and when I come back in '88, and it was the toughest campaign I ever had in my life. And Freddie on the Republican staff, I don't know if he's here now, but he's probably sitting over there. But anyway, he was a young staffer, was assigned to this candidate up in northwest Iowa from Spencer, Lake Park, and Bill Northey was his campaign manager, and Freddie was working for him, and they put on one hell of a campaign, let me tell you. But we won that election, and you know, today is the last day the legislators are getting paid per diem and mileage. And compare that to the 60s. There was no per diem or mileage. We got $40 a day for each legislative day. That was it. And we bought our own postage stamps, and we paid for our own long-distance telephone calls. And I think it was easier then to recruit candidates than it is now. Because one of the reasons is that a lot of candidates and families, they don't put themselves through what people go through to get elected here. And as it's already been said today, regardless of what party and regardless of what candidate, you go through these elections, that defines who you are. And another area I want to just mention, and that is a reapportionment. Reapportionment is term limits in Iowa. And in the last 60 years, I've been involved in 5 reapportionments. I was here in '64 when the courts ordered the state to reapportion. So we had a special session, and that's when we increased the size of the House to 124, and the Senate, I believe, was 59. Anyway, filled all these corners up with desks, and that stayed. The court said, okay, that'd give the urban areas more voice, and then the courts agreed with that until the states could truly get a one-man, one vote, and that happened, of course, in 1970. It was already mentioned by Senator Riley. The legislature couldn't agree on what to do on reapportionment, so the courts ordered a commission to reapportion. And I wasn't in the legislature then, and each congressional district, I think we had seven districts at that time, so each congressional district got one Democrat and one Republican to serve on that commission, and so I was picked to represent Northwest Iowa. And Senator Riley's dad served on that commission, and he was a lawyer down from Oskaloosa. But anyway, that was a great experience. And so we recommended a plan. It took 3 or 4 months to get it done. We visited all communities, had public hearings, and did all this stuff that you need to do. And that plan was approved by the legislature. And so in 1980, I was home raising a family and farming and doing whatever so I missed that one. But then I come back in 89, and I was a state government chair, and I was involved in the 91, and I was involved with 2001, and now 2011 one, I was involved in that too. And so I even handled the bill out here on the floor. And I said then, it was a different map. It kind of went towards Sioux Falls, and I mentioned then about we expanded gambling here in 2004, and that probably passed higher percentage than any gambling bill in history, because it done a lot of different things, and one of them was to expand the number of casinos. And of course, in my county, people had voted, in small rural county, and they applied for a license, and over a year and a half struggle and going to the commission and doing all what they did get awarded a license. And it's probably been one of the more successful casinos, percentage-wise, through these times, setting out in the country on a 2-lane road in a county of 9,700 people. So it's been a great thing for our small county. But how would I know in the reapportionment map that I'd be in the same district with a casino in Lyon County, 120 miles apart in that short span of time? Well, that's probably more than you want to hear about that. But anyway, renewable fuels have been mentioned. We have done a lot in Iowa for renewable fuels. I think we could have done a lot more. We're recognized nationally on renewable fuels. One thing I bring up at meetings, we built 54 refineries under 3 different governors. And I've talked to many of them contractors and investors, and every one of them talk about when they worked with the EPC and the people in the DNR to get these permits to build these refineries, that these public people worked day and night to see that those permits were on time, and I say that Iowa is a great place to do business. And in my mind, we need to remind folks about that occasionally. And, renewable fuels, we as a nation, we ought to do more in that regard. Flex fuel cars, every car made in this country ought to be a flex fuel car. You've heard me say that before. Costs a little over $100 a car. They got technology in a car today that will park itself. I don't know what the hell that costs. I know they spent more than that on the speakers, on the sound system of every car. there's no reason in the world that big oil and a lot of things enter into that, but that's kind of shameful to me, that let the consumers decide what kind of fuel they want to put in it, rather than the make or the engine of the car make that decision. And the other thing in regard to oil, I don't think, there's big numbers that the United States government and we all help pay, $250, $300 billion leaving this country, leaving North America to buy oil imported into North America. To me, that's a shame. We should never buy another barrel of oil outside of North America. That's Canada, Mexico. We have plenty of resources, and we should never spill another pint of blood in any country because of oil. A little bit has been said about the military and my military experience. My military experience is not any different than 99.9% of all the military. I mean, they do what they're told, they do what they're supposed to do, and that brings me to another point that we've done in this legislature. In 2006, I went to Mike Gronstall and others as easy sell that we need to have a veterans committee. And it used to be a veterans committee back in the 60s, but I don't know, somehow or another it disappeared as far as one of our committees. So anyway, both houses agreed to have a veterans committee, and that's, I like to compare that to the community college bill. There never has been a partisan vote. There's never been a partisan vote in committee. There's never been a partisan vote on this floor when it comes to veterans. And some huge issues. We've passed more veterans legislation in this state in the last 5 years than any other state in the nation. Because Iowa, and regardless of the war you want to talk about, Iowans have always had a very high percentage of veterans. Bill Sack told me, or I heard him say this at a speech in Washington, D.C., that rural America, like, is 2% of the nation's population. But rural America has supplied 14% of the military. And getting county Veterans Affairs offices all on the same page, nobody's writing about that or talking about that. That was a great achievement. And the other thing, taking care of the Guard and the educational system so these people can get a good public education or go to a private school if they so desire. So, and besides taking care of veterans and their families. Anyway, it's time for me to keep still. You've heard a lot today. I just appreciate working with everyone here, regardless of party. And I've tried, and thank you for allowing me to sit up in that chair for 8 years, 2 years as co-chair, and have been there since. I've tried to do my best, and I haven't heard too many complain about rulings that I've made that are fair to both sides. But it's been an absolute privilege for me to do that. And so with that, I want to thank all of you and the staff and the press and the lobby and everybody. Most Iowans really don't know how this place works. There's so many interest groups and pressures out there that we get so much, and people need to visit this capital and county government, city government, school government. I've talked to lots of young folks in high school and college groups with my connection to the community colleges. And one thing I tell them, register to vote as soon as you're old enough, and vote every time you get a chance. Whether it's a school election, a city election, a township election, I don't care what election it is, get involved. So thanks again for this opportunity that you've given me and Kay, and thanks to the family for coming down here today, and for all of you for all the kind remarks. Thank you very much.